Hey everybody, welcome back to our study in the book of Revelation. This is going to be part 3 of the Church of Philadelphia. And if you didn't go and see part 1 and part 2, it'd be good that you went back and got those under your belt, because I'm going to pick up right in the middle of the text, and I'm going to assume that you've heard the other material. So we're going to do a little bit of a review, and then I'm going to go into the promise he gives Philadelphia and the sets of rewards that he gives the Philadelphia believer. Now, the great thing about the Philadelphia believer, just to recall, this is the remnant church. This is the church that has no condemnation. In fact, Smyrna and Philadelphia are the only churches that have no condemnation, because they're doing the right thing. They're persevering through trials. They're persevering through persecutions. They're holding fast to his name. They don't give up on his word. They publicly identify with the Messiah, and that's why they're getting all this heat on them. Anyway, these two sets of churches are the remnant church. That Philadelphia element will last all the way to the rapture, because a rapture passage is mentioned in this particular church. And it's one of the promises he gives to all believers, but it's given to the Philadelphia element, okay? Which is the remnant church, the true believing church, okay? So, as we have talked about, all 7 churches contain false believers, they contain true believers, they contained unfaithful believers, and then there's faithful believers. So the 7 churches are a mixture of that. So when you look at the 7 churches, it's an umbrella term of Christendom, okay? So some of the message will be towards unbelievers, some of the message will be towards unfaithful believers, and in Philadelphia, the message is toward faithful believers, okay? And what they're going to be able to experience. So they're promised the rapture. Prior to the tribulation period. So we're going to look into that. But let's review. Let's go back and understand where we're at. So when I pick up here on the promises and the rewards, you'll understand what I'm talking about. So let's start in verse 8. It says, "I know your works." So the idea is that Messiah sees all that the churches are doing. He knows exactly what they're up to. And he goes, "See, I have set before you an open door that no one can shut it." And the idea of the open door, and we talked about this, is that Messiah has the authority to open ministry doors and close ministry doors. And so that's what he's done to Philadelphia, because they're faithful and they follow him. And so he opens doors of opportunity for ministry, okay? That's the idea. And when he opens it, no one can shut it. What he shuts, no one can open. So it's called the law of the harvest. So wherever the door is open, that's where we go and we minister, and we're the most effective. You don't try to bust through closed doors that Messiah hasn't opened. And so we're always looking in the law of the harvest where the harvest is, the open door. Anyway, he continues on. He says, "For you have little strength." And like we talked about it, the idea of little strength means the Philadelphia elements, the remnant churches, they typically have less people, they have less money, they have less resources, but yet they still get the job done. And that's the idea. You can have the big mega churches and all the money in the world, but they don't get a lot spiritually done. It may look like they're busy and they have a lot of programs, but spiritually they don't accomplish a lot. It's the Philadelphia element that Christ knows they have little strength. So he gives them the strength, he gives them the resources to do amazing things beyond their capabilities. So he acknowledges, "I know you guys have little strength." But he says, "Look, you have kept my word," he says, "and you have not denied my name." Kept his word means they have guarded his word and practiced it. And the idea of they have not denied my name has to do with they publicly confess and publicly identify with the Messiah. So what does that mean? Well, they're not silent Christians. They're not secret Christians. One of the things you see in the Bible is that it's said in John chapter 12, I think it's verse 42, I'm going off the top of my head, where it says that many of the Pharisees believed in him but would not confess him publicly, lest they be put out of the synagogue. And so the idea is there was all these secret believers among the Pharisees that believed in Messiah, but they could not come out publicly and say it, otherwise they would be cut off. So that's what happens to a lot of people that are getting pressured and persecuted, is they become silent about their public identification with the Messiah. And that's what he's telling them, that they have not denied his name. They have publicly said, I identify with Jesus, and if you're going to persecute me for that, so be it. And that's how they've been able to deal with their persecution, is they have not shrunk back. Okay. Then he says, we talked about that. Then he says, indeed, I will make those of the synagogue of Satan who say they are Jews and are not, but lie. Indeed, I will make them come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Now, what is this about? Like, well, what we talked about was the early church was suffering Jew-on-Jew persecution. It was unbelieving Jews persecuting believing Jews in the Messiah, right? So that was the original intent here of what was happening on the ground. Okay, so that's why it calls them a synagogue of Satan, and that they had claimed that they're the true spiritual Jews, but the true spiritual Jews that had gotten saved were the ones that were true. And of course, they were lying, saying, you're not a real Jew, you're not this, you're not that. And so they had to suffer that persecution. And furthermore, they were cut off from the synagogue. And man, when you were cut off from the synagogue, that means you had no business ties, you had familial ties, everything was cut off to you. And that's why the early church in the book of Acts had to come together and help one another, because the Jewish community had cut them off. Okay. So he promises that one day I'm going to make those who claim to be Jews that were really not, they were just simply biological Jews, not spiritual Jews that had come to faith in the Messiah. I'm going to have them worship before your feet and know that I have loved you, that you were the ones that were right and they were wrong. So what you do is you can broaden this principle out to today. And the principle is it's not Jew-on-Jew persecution that we're dealing with anymore. It's the fact that there are so many religions out there, so many cults that call themselves Christians, so many people that think they're spiritual, and they call us unbelievers. They call us the haters, that we're really not Christians because of the stances we take by holding to God's word. That we believe that marriage is between a man and a woman. We believe there's only two genders, right? Those kinds of things. And so we get hatred towards that. We believe in nations, not a one world global government, right? You get hatred for that. You're racist, you're xenophobic, you're homophobic, all those things, Islamophobic. And they claim that they're the real followers of God, right? That they, in their own cults that they have created and their false religions, they say they're the followers of God and we aren't, right? The promise is that one day those people will stand before the Lord in worshiping Him, and they will have to be forced to admit that we were the ones that were right and they were wrong. And this cuts both ways. It not only cuts both ways for the unbeliever who does this to us, but it also cuts this way for the apostate believer or Laodicean believer that gives us heat. Now look, man, I'll tell you right now, I get more heat, more backlash from Laodiceans and apostate Christians and those who claim to be Christians and are part of a cult or something like that. I get more heat from the inside in the church rather than from the outside. Those who say that I'm not right with God, because we came out and we told people we're not going to shut down our churches and don't take the experimental drug they want to put in you. And we were called the murdering church. I was called the murdering pastor by other Laodicean believers. And now the fact that all the evidence has come out about the experimental drugs and the whole Charlie Oscar Victor Igloo Delta 19er has all come out, and we know that people are dropping like flies because of it, they still double down. They still double down. But the idea is, when you get those rebukes, and they're ungodly rebukes, calling me the murdering pastor, the murdering church, that one day will be accounted for when Jesus tells them, now admit that you were wrong and they were right. And so there's a justification in all of this, from getting heat not only from the outside, but from the inside. And again, this is good because those of us that are in this fight are called by our family member. Well, you don't love Jesus. Jesus wouldn't do that. Jesus wouldn't say that. Jesus is loving. And it's just totally wrong, right? But they always will condemn you for holding fast to God's word. God's word says no. Marriage is between a man and a woman. God's word says no, they're only male and female, and so forth, right? And so you're going to get the heat for saying things like that, but you will be justified in the end. So we talked about that last time. Anyway, when will this happen actually? Where will this happen? When does it take place? Well, it depends. It depends on what you're dealing with. It depends on if you're dealing with unbelievers or you're dealing with believers. If you're dealing with a believer that actually mocked you and said that you weren't following God when you really were and they were the ones that weren't, that will probably happen at the Bema seat, right? And as we've talked about, many believers will be at the Bema seat and they will be ashamed of how they live their Christian life. And you can see this in 1 John 2:28. And now, little children, abide in him, that when he appears, we may have confidence and not be ashamed before him at his coming. And the idea is that people are going to be ashamed at the Bema seat. Now, people will tell me, well, Brandon, I thought there's no tears in heaven. There's no bad feelings in heaven. Wait a second. Let's back up on this. It says in the New Jerusalem, there is no crying, mourning, death, or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. In New Jerusalem. Now, New Jerusalem is part of the third abode. You got to remember that. The third abode is the dwelling place of God. But there's more aspects in the abode of God rather than just New Jerusalem. New Jerusalem is the new addition to the third abode. I go to prepare a place for you. That was, in the ascension, right? Okay. But what existed before the New Jerusalem in the third abode? Well, you had the temple of God. The temple of God still exists. In fact, the temple of God was desecrated by Satan, and that's why in Hebrews 9, Jesus had to take his blood to cleanse the heavenly temple, the heavenly tabernacle, because of what Satan had done. Furthermore, look at the book of Revelation, chapter 6. I saw the souls under the altar. Altar of where? The altar of the temple in heaven. This is what Moses patterned the tabernacle off of seeing the temple of God in heaven. Okay, so we have a temple. We also have a throne, the throne of God there as well. And we also have a mountain that's referred to, that New Jerusalem sits on a mountain. So what you have to understand is heaven is very dynamic. It has a lot of different aspects to it. And one aspect is New Jerusalem. So back to this whole thing. The throne of God is where the Bema seat will happen, the judgment seat of Christ. Okay. So at that Bema seat, that's not in the New Jerusalem. Only New Jerusalem has no crying, mourning, or pain, or sorrow. But in front of the throne of God, there will be. And that's where John is coming back saying, look, man, there's going to be people that are ashamed of how they lived as a Christian in front of him. Other passages talk about a loss of rewards and the shame associated to the loss of rewards. The idea of being found naked is an issue of rewards, that you have nothing that you did in your life. Your rewards were burned up because of, you created your Christian life based on wood, hay, and stubble and not precious metals, as 1 Corinthians notes, chapter 3. And so all your works are burned up. There's nothing to reward you for. And that's the idea of being found naked. Naked in Scripture, that there's nothing the Lord can give you in reward for how you lived your life. So anyway, this is a big deal. Another passage I want to bring to your attention of how serious this is at the judgment seat of Christ. I want to turn your attention to Matthew 24, 45 through 51. And it says this, "Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom his master made ruler over his household to give them food in due season?" Now, first off, we're dealing with the Olivet Discourse, and we're dealing with an application after what he's discussed. And so in this passage, it's an application to all believers, okay? And so it starts off, who is the faithful and wise servant? So the fact that we're dealing with servants means that we're dealing with believers, okay? Unbelievers are not called servants. So he gives these servants responsibility. He makes them master over his household while he's gone, and they're supposed to give food in due season. This is the idea of spiritual authority and spiritual responsibility that all believers are given. Okay? All believers are responsible for the spiritual authority they've been given and the spiritual responsibilities they've been given as stewards and as servants of the master. Okay. Verse 46, blessed is that servant whom his master, when he comes, will find him so doing. Right? Being responsible, carrying out the faithfulness of following out the edicts of the Messiah. Okay. Assuredly, I say to you that he will make him ruler over all his goods. And that's the idea of ruling and reigning in the Messianic kingdom. Okay? So there's a reward attached to being a faithful steward. Then in verse 48, but if that evil servant, yes, he's talking about a believer being evil, says in his heart, my master is delaying in his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants. So that's the first thing this guy will do, or this believer will do, is that he starts, instead of serving the body of Christ, he has the body of Christ serve him or her, and then we'll go into spiritual abuse of the other believers, treat them bad, treat them wrong, wickedly, gossip, slander them, all that stuff that believers are warned not to do to other believers. So he will mistreat his fellow servants, is the idea. And then what the guy does is he goes and it says, and to eat and drink with the drunkards. So then this guy or this gal not only mistreats the servants, his other brothers and sisters in the Lord, these other servants, but he goes and carouses with the world and gets involved in the sinful activities of this world. They become worldly, okay? Drink with drunkards and eat with them means that they're fellowshipping in the wrong circles, and that's causing them to get involved in the ways of the world. Okay, that's what it's saying about these believers. And so what happens? Verse 50, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour that he is not aware of. Talking about the rapture. So what will happen is, because these people are living a Laodicean life, a worldly life, they're not paying attention to what's going on, the signs of the times, when the rapture does happen, it will take them by surprise. You and I are watching the season. We're always trying to be alert, watching for our Lord's return, and that makes us spiritually wanting to live a more holier life, a more circumspectual life, that we're looking at our lives, doing introspection, trying to grow, trying to learn, so that we stay alert, right? But they're not alert. They're not even looking for him. They could care less if he comes because they're having too good of a time here, right? So he's going to come in a time they're unaware of. And look in verse 51, it says, and he will cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So let me explain that just a little bit, because these are Jewish idioms, okay? So the rapture then takes all believers, true believers, whether unfaithful or faithful believers, okay? All believers are taken. And these unfaithful believers that did this as a bad steward are going to be taken unaware, and the first place we end up after we're raptured is the bema seat of Christ in front of the judgment, okay, of the Messiah. This is a judgment of rewards, not of sin. But your sin has a secondary influence on your rewards, because your sin could cause you to lose rewards, okay? So it's not a judgment of sin, it's a judgment of what God can give you as far as rewards, or what he has to take away, okay? So this is what he says about this unfaithful servant. He goes, I will cut him in two, okay? What is that? It's a figure of speech. It's a Jewish idiom. It'd be like, boy, his words cut me. Boy, those were cutting words. It's an idiom like that. And the idea of cutting two has to do with sawing the person in two, okay? But not literally. But what do you mean? Well, it's a figure of speech in how deep the words of Christ will cut the person in two. Just like we see that the Word of God is active and can pierce even the bones and the marrow, and even pierce and divide the soul from the spirit, right? In Hebrews chapter 4, it talks about that's how powerful the Word of God. Well, obviously, if you're standing in front of Jesus and he's speaking to you about how you failed, what you failed to do, those words will cut you literally, not literally, but metaphorically in two. They will hurt you so bad. Okay, really, in essence, these kinds of believers will get the biggest tongue lashing from the Messiah, the biggest verbal rebuke they could possibly imagine from God himself, for the way they acted and the way they treated other believers and the way they decided to live like the world. Okay, Doesn't mean they're thrown into hell. It means they're going to get a verbal lashing at the judgment seat of Christ. Okay, what else will happen? And appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. The portion is you're now identified in the Messianic kingdom as one that is a hypocrite. And the fact that you were saved and didn't do anything with your life. In fact, you were saved and you actually lived like a pagan, and even though you were saved. And so in your identification in the Messianic kingdom, you're going to be identified with hypocrites. And that's like wearing a scarlet A in the Messianic kingdom. And that's the portion that's allotted to this person. It's an identity. And I'm telling you, you don't want this. You don't want this scarlet H hypocrisy. Does the Bible call believers hypocrites? Absolutely, it does. It calls them hypocrites. It calls us not to be involved in hypocrisy. Jesus called the Pharisees hypocrites, and they were unbelievers, right? But we can be a hypocrite too, according to Scripture as well. And then he says, there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, what does that mean? That doesn't mean being thrown into hell. In some passages, weeping and gnashing of teeth is used for hell, but in this passage and other passages, it's used for believers. What is that? Weeping and gnashing of teeth is a Jewish idiom, okay? It's actually a Middle Eastern idiom. And it has to do with simply extreme regret over the loss of a major valuable reward or something that was valuable and that you lost it because of what you did. And it can be tied to anger because the person regrets what they did and now they can't get that reward back. Like Esau wanting to get the birthright back after he sold it to Jacob, remember, for porridge and a bowl of stew, remember that? It will be that kind of weeping and gnashing of teeth. Gnashing of teeth, it has to do with kind of an anger, but it's a self-directed anger that they missed out. And the sorrowness has to do with they're not going to get it back. And so that's where at the Bema seat, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. It won't last for long. Once the judgment's over, that will move on. We'll have our new bodies, obviously, and we'll move on. But that will be where this weeping and gnashing of teeth happen, is at the judgment seat. It does not happen in the New Jerusalem. Okay. Now, one more thing. If unbelievers are doing this to us, right? Like the Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, Islam, you name it. And of course, we're talking about unbelievers, or the woke crowd saying they're following God by saving the planet, yada, yada, yada. So if the unbelievers do it to us, it will happen at the great white throne judgment. So it depends on who's doing the mocking. But what Christ is promising, whether a believer or an unbeliever is mocking you, saying you're not the true follower of God, one day I will make them confess on their knees before me and before you that I loved you, that you and I were the ones that had the relationship, and you were right in following me, and that they are wrong. They were dead wrong. So that will happen at the great white throne judgment with unbelievers. And as you know, Philippians 2 talks about that. At the name of Jesus, every knee will bow, those in heaven and those on earth, and those under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So they're going to definitely do that. But as they're on their knees, he's promising them, I'm going to make them confess that these are my people and not you. Okay? It's not the Mormons, it's not the Jehovah's Witnesses, it's the true Philadelphia element, both Jew and Gentile. Now, he's going to go now into a promise and two rewards, okay? So the first one is a promise to all believers in this text. It starts in verse 10. Because, it should be probably translated since you have kept my command to persevere. It's the idea that you obeyed his command to have patient endurance. That's what perseverance means, patient endurance. It's like what the Messiah did. He patiently endured all the way to the cross, gave up his life, died, and was buried, right? And then resurrected. That was called patient endurance. Christ is our example of that. So he calls us as believers, as a Philadelphia element, to persevere despite persecution and hardship. That you don't give up. You don't surrender to evil trying to break you. You don't let evil hold you back from serving. And you publicly confess the Messiah to everyone you know. And you don't reject the Messiah's message. You actually promote it. You promote his teachings and you promote what Jesus said despite all the pushback. You never give up on his message. You never give up on his principles. You never give up on his law. And you never give up on the meanings of the Bible, right? You endure this persecution for standing for the truth. That's what it's talking about as far as perseverance. Please do not read in Calvinism or Arminianism into the word perseverance. Otherwise, you will mess up. Calvinist's idea of perseverance has to do that only believers will persevere to the end. So if you don't persevere to the end, you're not a believer. That's totally bunk. That's wrong. That's not what the message is. Perseverance doesn't prove you're a believer. Perseverance is about you standing in the face of persecution, and only those who have the spiritual strength to do so will finish to the end. It has nothing to do with your salvation. Furthermore, if you look at it from the Arminian side, they come in and say, well, if you don't persevere, you lost salvation, right? That's totally wrong too. If a believer stops persevering, they don't lose salvation, they lose rewards. That's the whole point of the passage. So the Calvinist and the Arminian totally get it wrong. So again, this is the message that we just derive from the scripture, not importing theological concepts into the term endurance or patient endurance or perseverance. So here's the promise to all believers, unfaithful or faithful. Okay? So he says, I also will keep you from, and in the term is tereo ek, will keep you out. Okay? Now this is important to understand. To keep you out means I'm going to take you out before it starts. Okay? Now, if John wanted to explain this any other way of saying, well, I'm going to keep you in it. I'm going to let you go through it. I'm going to pull you out in the middle of it. I'm going to pull you out at this point in time. He could have used other Greek words. So he didn't use like tereho en, to keep in, that he's going to preserve you in it. Or he didn't use tereo dia to keep you through it. He didn't use areo ek to take you out once it has started or to save you out of it once it begins. Again, he could have used these terms, but he didn't. So the idea that a believer is not going through the tribulation in the church and is going to be eventually taken out in a mid-tribulational rapture or a post-tribulational rapture or a pre-wrath rapture. Okay? He didn't even use areo apo to take you from the hour of trial, I should say, which will come upon the whole world. He didn't use those. He used tereo ek. That means take you out before it happens. Okay? So anyway, this hour of trial, he says, the hour of trial which shall come upon the whole world. Not just a region, not just, what's happening in 95 AD. No. It's coming upon the whole world. It's global in scale. And the only hour of trial that we know that is going to be global in scale is the 7-year tribulation. And there's many names given it to Jacob's trouble, Daniel's 70th week. In fact, there's about 30 names given to it, both in the Old and New Testament. And one of the names is the hour of trial, because it's said to come upon the whole world. Now, the issue then, why? Well, it's to test those who dwell on the earth at that time. And where do we get this idea? Well, you'll see it in Revelation. It'll keep saying in your English translation, those who dwell on the earth, those who dwell on the earth. And it's actually a technical name. It means earth dweller. Okay? It means an unbeliever. It's to test the unbelievers. That's what it's for, not to test believers. It's not a testing time for us. It's to test those who dwell on the earth. Okay, where did this term come from? Well, it came from Jesus. Those who dwell on the earth, that technical term of earth dwellers. So you go back to Luke 21, which is part of the Olivet Discourse. The Olivet Discourse is in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21. Okay? So in Luke 21, 34 through 35, Jesus will make a statement that that day is coming, right? and it will come as a snare to all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Okay? Again, this is a technical term, earth dwellers, and it gives the impression that believers are sojourners, pilgrims on the earth. But earth dwellers are not. They are not sojourners. They're not pilgrims. They live their lives here. And they create their own spiritual reality that revolves around this earth. And this is why they're worldly. This is why they're materialistic. And all of this is humanly and demonically inspired, obviously. It's demonic spirituality. But that's why they're called earth dwellers. We are called heavenly dwellers. We belong to heaven. We are, so on this earth, we are pilgrims and we're just passing through. We don't set our roots down. We're tent dwellers like Abraham, right? And so that's where this technical term comes from. It comes from the Messiah, and then it's carried through in the book of Revelation. And I can't remember, I'd have to count again how many times the word in the book of Revelation, earth dwellers, occurs. And for some reason in my head, I think it occurs 11 times, and for some reason I'm thinking 19 times. So it's something like that, but it's a lot. And each time it's used in a technical sense. These are unbelievers that are being tested. And then this leads into why we're not there as the church. Okay? Will the believers that come out of the tribulation? Of course, you're going to have multitudes of Gentiles, multitudes of Jews. The whole nation of Israel will be saved, of course. But we're talking about him saying you're going to be kept out of this testing time that's coming upon the earth dwellers. So we're not earth dwellers. Okay? And again, there's tons of reasons why we believe in a pre-tribulational rapture. This is just one. This is just a couple of things that's pointed out in this text, but there's a whole bunch. So I don't want to belabor it too much, but I want to tell you, kind of where we're coming from. So, in order, if you follow Jesus in Luke 21 in the Olivet Discourse, he says, in order to avoid basically the tribulation, you have to be off the earth. And the only way to be off the earth is to be saved and raptured. Okay? That's because it's coming on earth dwellers. You have to be off the earth. So when you look at Luke 21:36, he says, and you have to stand before the Son of Man. So you have to be off the earth, and you have to stand before the Son of Man. Well, what is that a reference to? Standing before Jesus is a result of the rapture and refers to the Bema seat, which allows us to escape the tribulation, because that's the first place we go. We're raptured, we go instantly to the Bema seat. And that's where the idea of standing before the Son of Man is a safe spot to be off of the earth before him at the Bema. And so Messiah adds this, and that's where you get the technical word and where you get the concept of you have to be off the earth and stand in front of the Son of Man. The Son of Man is not going to be on earth. Where is the Son of Man? He's in heaven. You will stand by him and before him at the Bema. So another proof that the rapture is pre-tribulational. Okay? Let's continue on. So now we're going to get to the rewards. That's the promise to all the church. Now here are the rewards to Philadelphia overcomers. And what are Philadelphia overcomers? They overcome, they persevere to the end, and they endure persecution, and they don't let it stop them. Okay? So here's the rewards. In verse 11 it says, behold, I am coming quickly. What does that mean, quickly? It doesn't mean soon. It means that when the activities of the Messiah start, like the rapture, it will happen very suddenly. It will be quickly. In fact, we'll be changed in the twinkling of an eye. It's that fast. And so that's the idea behind it. And in other passages you'll see in Revelation that you'll see the same wording, that behold, I come quickly, my reward is with me, and those kinds of things. It's the idea that once it starts, it happens very fast. Everything will start happening very, very quickly. That's what is the manner in which these things will develop very quickly. That's why it says that. It doesn't mean, hey, I'm coming soon. No, it doesn't mean that. So anyway, there's a big difference, especially in this context. Behold, I'm coming quickly. The rapture is very quickly. The second coming is not. The second coming is going to be seen by all the world. The rapture will not be seen by all the world. that will just vanish, and that's it. The graves will open, the bodies will come out that are dead in Christ, and then you and I will remain, are translated, and we're gone. It's a signless event, and that makes it different than the second coming. The second coming is an event that all the world sees. And of course, it's a coming back to rescue Israel and to destroy the Antichrist and his armies and whatnot. The rapture's not that. It is a snatching away, a harpazo, not a parousia, of the believers, and it comes quickly, right? So he goes on and he says, hold fast to what you have, that no one may take your crown, okay? So the idea with a crown is these believers, because they have been persevering, have been rewarded. They've already stored up treasure in heaven. So they, because of what they've done so far, are earning a crown, okay? But notice what he says, that no one may take your crown. So hold fast to what you have. What it means is hold fast to my word, keep doing what you're doing, persevering under the persecution. Don't give up, don't surrender, and don't let these evil people beat you down to where you do give up and you do surrender and you stop talking and you stop telling the truth and allow them to take your crown and lose your reward because you didn't keep persevering. He goes, don't give them that. And so that's what he's trying to say. Okay, so what are these crowns? Crowns are given. There's about 5 crowns, as you can see in Scripture. One of them is this. And these crowns are for ruling and reigning in the Messianic kingdom. So anytime you see a crown, it means rulership in the Messianic kingdom. Okay? So they have earned the right to rule and reign with Messiah. Now, not all believers will rule and reign with Messiah. All believers get into the kingdom because of faith, but not all believers rule and reign. That's a reward for faithfulness and perseverance. So, that's what you have to understand about this reward. It is about ruling and reigning. And so you must think about this in an application. Why do people stop persevering? Why do they give up? Why do they surrender? Because of all kinds of things. Fear. They don't want to lose their job if they say anything. Fear from their family. People apostatize. They go into false doctrine. That's why they don't keep persevering. Or their friends or relatives hold them back. The group that they're around hold them back and they don't persevere. They just want to go along to get along. They get spiritually fatigued. A lot of us get spiritually fatigued and they just can't do it anymore and they're tired of the heat. So they just stop. People get angry and mad about the way their life is going or how things are being taken from their life. And so they just surrender and they give up. And then other people want to appease human beings. They're people pleasers. They don't want to make any waves, so they don't tell people the truth. Or they don't want to lose their reputations with the world. You know, hey, I don't want to be seen as a bad guy or a mean guy because, you know, I'm coming against the LGBT movement or I'm coming against the, I don't know, the World Economic Forum and saving the planet junk. And so they don't want to lose a reputation with the world. But here's the thing. If you identify with Jesus, you're going to lose your reputation with the world. He says they're going to hate you. So you just have to take it on the chin and deal with it. And then, as you can see with the people, why they don't persevere, they bury their responsibility. Just like the guy who buried his talent. They just bury it and they don't want to do it. So that's why they will have their crowns taken away. They will not persevere. He continues on to another reward. He says, he who overcomes. And the overcomer in this picture is a believer who perseveres to the end. Okay? Whether it's the rapture or the end of their life. He goes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, and he shall go out no more. Now, what is this about? Well, we obviously know there's a temple in heaven, but we also know there's a temple in the Messianic reign, right? Ezekiel 40 through 48 talks about the Messianic temple that Jesus builds, and Zechariah notes that Jesus is the one who builds the temple in the Messianic reign, and Jesus will rule and reign from that temple. Okay, so the idea, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God, obviously is metaphorical language. He's not literally going to turn into a stone pillar, obviously. What does that mean? Well, you got to look at the background of what was going on in Philadelphia at the time to get the gist of this. In Philadelphia and in the ancient world, they put up pillars. There was a lot of pillars. You had that Greco-Roman architecture, right? And even in Jewish construction, they had pillars as well. You remember the Solomon's temple had 2 pillars, right? So pillars were used not only for like decorations, but they were there obviously to stabilize things, to stabilize. And they became very prominent in the ancient world, right? In all of the ancient cultures. So what does this mean? Well, to be made a pillar in the temple of God, it means that the believer is going to be rewarded with a permanent position of prominence and closeness to the Messiah that actually can never be taken away, and it will be seen by all. That's what it's trying to say. The person is honored with kingdom responsibility of ruling and reigning with Christ in the Messianic age and in close proximity to the Messianic temple. Remember, a temple of my God, the temple, the Messianic temple. So some believers who have persevered will have the proximity of being closer to Christ in proximity, serving Him in a closer way, and this will be seen by all and identified by all like a pillar would as you walk into a temple. Like if you walked into the Jewish temple, you had the two pillars in front of you and you'd walk by them, you would see them. And that was a sign of stability. It was a sign of prominence. It was a sign that, okay, this is an area that's close to where God is, okay? And that's what the idea is. Now, again, we don't know all the details about this, but I'm just giving you the principles behind what we're talking about. And it's basically a position that gives the person the ability to have a special relationship with Jesus in the Messianic kingdom, and that special position, that special authority, and that identity can never be rescinded is the idea. And then it says, he shall go out no more. Well, what's the background of that phrase? Well, again, man, if you looked at where Philadelphia was at in Turkey, it was earthquake central, okay? Philly had a lot of earthquakes. And so people, interesting enough, people are so afraid of being crushed by the buildings that they were living in the city, them falling down upon them when an earthquake hit, and it happened so much, they actually went out and lived outside the city in like these makeshift homes and tents and huts and stuff like that. Really weird, because they were afraid to live in the city. They didn't want stuff falling on them and killing them. So Philadelphia was a picture of people leaving the city constantly to avoid being killed by the earthquakes. So Philadelphia was a picture of instability, okay? They couldn't experience stability or permanence in living in their homes in the city, and so they would always go to the countryside, and that's how they kind of lived. It was weird. And so the key idea here is instability and no place of permanency, okay? Well, what the reward is telling them is, unlike the city that you lived in, or unlike the world that we live in that has instability and no permanence whatsoever in our lives, right? Believers who persevere are promised stability and permanence in the reward they receive. And again, I don't know all the details behind it, but the idea is that when these rewards are distributed, the Philadelphia believers will never have their rewards taken from them, obviously, because they're eternal rewards, so they have that stability. And once these positions of honor and authority are given to the overcomer, they're never going to be rescinded either. So they have their identity, they have their rewards, and it gives them stability, it gives them permanence. And so we don't know all the details about the rewards, but what it's trying to tell you is what it gives the believer in eternity. They finally will be satisfied. Now again, not all believers get these rewards. This is what we call a life enhancement in eternity. So some people will experience eternity at a far greater experience. They will have all these other things that they get to experience, while others don't. This is the concept of rewards that no one really wants to talk about, but it is a big deal. And how do you want to spend eternity? You want to expend it and to experience all that the rewards that Christ wants to give us? Of course you do. I want to experience this idea of permanence and stability in my life, because there's none here, right? It's always unstable and there's no permanence or anything like that. But I want to feel that reward. I want to experience that reward, whatever that might be. And then he goes into another reward of an identity that's promised to us. who overcome this. He goes, I will write on him the name of my God. Now, what is this? Well, you got to go back to kind of an ancient tradition and it has to do with the slaves in the ancient world. So when a slave was freed by his master, he paid his debt or whatever, he actually could stay with the master and keep the master's name if the master allowed it. And this would allow him, if he decided to stay, a social status of the master, that he was part of the master's family, okay? So the concept here is writing one's name on something indicates ownership and social status, okay? So write the name of my God is a reward to only these special overcoming believers, that they will have a special social status in the Messianic age and into all eternity because of this. And again, the identity is given to those who persevere and who co-rule with Christ. They will have this special social status all throughout eternity. So again, identity represents the rewards of the overcomer and their identity for all eternity, that they serve the Lord faithfully here and now. They never backed down. They held up his word. They never compromised. They persevered to the end despite persecution and opposition. They had publicly confessed Christ on earth and identified with him. And now they are identified in all of eternity as those who kept their confession of the Messiah. And they were not ashamed of him. And so that's their reward. And then he goes on and says, and the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. Now, let me give you some history on the background on this. Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia had its name changed a bunch of times because of certain allegiances it made. And the first allegiance it made is AD 17. Earthquake devastated the city. So Tiberius, who was the Roman emperor at the time, he remitted them from having to be taxed. He gave them a generous gift to rebuild the city, and he did all these wonderful things to help Philadelphia rebuild itself. So in their gratitude, they called their city Neo-Caesarea, or the new city of Caesar. So in honor of him. And then later on, when Vespasian came in, and he was also nice to them and helped them, and they did that, they honored him by calling Philadelphia Flavia. And this was after, Vespasian's family and the family name, and so they renamed it that. Okay, so that's the background on the city. Had many names in honor of certain people. Okay, so in our new identity, in our ownership, and now we see the reward here of our new citizenship if we persevere. Now, the identity is that those believers that do this will represent the promise of the new Jerusalem to all the Messianic kingdom. Because remember, in the Messianic kingdom, you're going to have mortals that are Jewish and Gentile that made it through the tribulation. And you and I will be there ruling and reigning, but we will represent New Jerusalem, where we don't even represent Messianic Jerusalem. Remember, there will be a Messianic Jerusalem, there'll be a Messianic temple, but we represent New Jerusalem in heaven. That's our identity. And the idea is we represent that not only to be a witness that you too can be a member of the New Jerusalem city. You can become a citizen of New Jerusalem by coming to faith in the Messiah during the Messianic reign. Okay? So it gives us that status that we're associated to that city, not any other city. And so it's an identity reward, really. And then it goes on and says, I will write on him my new name. Now this is interesting. The reason that Jesus is going to get a new name that no one knows right now what it is because he will be given a new work during the Messianic age. And that name will signify the new work that he's doing. So when this new name is given to Jesus, it's going to be written on these believers who are rewarded with it. And basically the idea is if he writes this new name on them, they will get to share in this new work with him during the millennial reign. That's how this works. So a lot of this is identity. A lot of this has to do with authority, and it doesn't spell out all the details. In fact, it's meant not to spell out all the details and rewards, because a lot of it we just simply wouldn't understand because we don't live in that period of time. But he says, take it by faith. You're going to want these rewards. You want to be able to represent New Jerusalem. You want to represent all these identities that I give you if you persevere. You're going to want that. It's important. Okay? And then he ends the letter to Philadelphia. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. So the message is to anyone that's listening, believer, unfaithful or faithful. If you're faithful, keep doing what you're doing. If you're unfaithful, it's time to repent and get back on track and do the things that are necessary to persevere to the end so you can get the rewards that he's spelling out here. But again, it's an option. He who has an ear, let him hear. So it's not, God is giving us the free will of whether or not we're going to persevere or shrink back in fear. But this is what he promises. This is the rewards. And he says, you can do it. You can do it. They did it. You can do it. No matter how evil this world gets, you can continue to persevere all the way to the end. Amen? All right. So that wraps up Philadelphia. We'll be on to the next church, which is Laodicea. We'll see you next time, okay? God bless you.